With that introduction to today's symposium, I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Todd Litman.
Thank you very much.
Let me do the introduction, if I may. Our keynote speaker, Todd Litman, is the founder and executive director of the Victoria Transport Policy Institute, an independent research organization dedicated to the developing innovative solutions to transport problems. His work helps expand the range of impacts and options considered in transportation decision-making, improve evaluation methods, and make specialized technical concepts accessible to a larger audience. His research is used worldwide in transport planning and policy analysis, and he's no stranger to New Zealand. And we are thrilled to have him back here, this time in Dunedin. Today, he will be talking about how youth can benefit from multimodalism. Please give a warm welcome, warm Kiwi welcome to Todd Litman.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm visiting from another hemisphere. I've come a long way, and I'm very much appreciating this chance to share some of the research that I'm doing with those of you in the studio and worldwide. I'm going to be talking about how and why to make transportation systems better serve teenagers. We can think very simply of two different types of transportation systems. There's an automobile-oriented system, and there's a multimodal system. So the multimodal system means that you can get around without having to drive everywhere, that you can walk, bicycle, use public transportation, and use automobiles for using each mode for what it does best. The type of transportation system that we have results from a number of policy and planning decisions. Things like the supply of roads. Are we building roads that are 2 lanes, 4 lanes, or 6 lanes? Do we design roads for lower speeds, especially in cities? Are the urban arterials, that is the major roads in a city, are they designed for low speed, let's say under 30 kilometers an hour, or high speeds? Are they designed for 50 or 60 kilometers an hour? Do we design our buildings around parking? You know, in order to meet an automobile-oriented transportation system, when you build a building, there's usually far more land devoted to parking than there is to the building. So parking becomes a dominant land use if we want to have an automobile-oriented transportation system. And also, with automobile-oriented transportation, we're locating our new buildings, say a school or a store or an office complex. Those are located where they're easy to drive to, which usually means along a highway at the urban fringe. A multimodal transportation system puts far more emphasis on good sidewalks, crosswalks, and paths. It has lower vehicle speed. You have lots of bike paths and bicycle parking. You have high-quality public transit. You have more compact development. So you're making sure that most activities, most destinations are within convenient walking distance of each other and within convenient walking distance of public transportation. And that all works out great. If you design a community, a city or a town with the multimodal features, it becomes possible for people to get around very efficiently without needing to drive. So let's think about this. A typical young person, an adolescent, you have many travel demands. Travel demands is the way we think about the types of trips that you need to make, the places you need to go. And if you're in an automobile-dependent community, automobile-oriented, when you go to school, when you go to visit friends, when you go to sports practice, when you go shopping, and when you visit distant friends, when you visit somebody who's outside of your community, you're going to have to be chauffeured. If you have a multimodal transportation system It means that people who, for whatever reason, they can't drive, they're young, they're too old, they're physically disabled, they're low income, you have real options to choose from. And so it means that more of those trips that you take are going to be able to be under your own power. Let me ask you this. How many of you in this room eat free-range eggs? You eat eggs from free-range chickens who are able to get around on their own. Okay, do we want free-range people? Do we want to create a community where it is perfectly normal and legitimate for a young person to leave their home and go to schools, go visit their friends, go to sports practices, go shopping, and even travel to a nearby town under your own control, independently, without having mom chauffeur you? Is that good? Is there a value to being a free-range person? Absolutely. You can call it independence, you can call it freedom, but it is what you as young people are aspiring to. The transition from being a dependent child to being an adult means over time you're becoming more and more independent. You have your own control over your life. And there is nothing more fundamental and more critical than your ability to travel around your community on your own without having to be chauffeured. Okay, so this slide points out that if you compare the mode share, that is the portion of trips by different forms of transportation from different countries in the world, there are very good examples of affluent countries where most people rely on walking, bicycling, and public transit for a significant portion of their trip. Unfortunately, we lack New Zealand data, but New Zealand is probably there around Australia and the United States, where a very small portion of trips are made by walking, cycling, and public transit, indicating automobile dependency. If you want to be a free-range young person, you are far better off in the United Kingdom, in Norway, in Denmark, in Finland, in Germany, Austria, Sweden, Spain, the Netherlands, or Sweden, because those are communities, those are countries where there is a much better effort, they are much more successful in providing the transportation options that non-drivers need. So, who benefits from multimodalism? Well, youths do. But so do seniors. So do people who can't drive because of a disability. So do households with low incomes. So do motorists who want to avoid chauffeuring non-drivers. So not only do you benefit from having a multimodal transportation system, but your parents do because they're not having to spend a lot of time driving you around. People who walk or bicycle for enjoyment and health. And their pets. People who don't want air pollution. And motorists who don't want traffic and parking congestion. Even people who rely on driving, even your parents who drive even if your parents drive everywhere, they benefit if your community allows you to to use alternative forms of transportation because it's reducing the traffic congestion, the parking problems, the air pollution, and their need to chauffeur you around. So my research indicates that there are very significant benefits to everybody in a community from making sure that it's possible to walk, bicycle, and use high-quality public transit in addition to driving. We're not talking about taking away people's right to drive, but we are saying we need a better balance. The challenge that we face is that conventional transportation planning fails to account for many of these benefits. So when a city councilor, or when a city traffic engineer, or when a planner, or when a developer is trying to decide how to create a city, or is making the decisions that affect what type of transportation system you have, and how your city is laid out, and therefore the ease of getting around by walking, cycling, and public transit, they tend to undervalue things like sidewalks and crosswalks and lower traffic speeds and high-quality public transit. And they're going to overinvest in wide roads, and they're going to overinvest in parking. And they're going to locate buildings where it's convenient to drive to rather than making sure that it's convenient to get there by walking, bicycling, and public transit. And that is the fundamental problem that we face, is that our planning process locks in the decisions that deprive you as a non-driver of the opportunity to get around without a car, without being chauffeured. So there's a great quote from the mayor of Bogota that I find very inspiring. He said, "A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars. It's where the rich use public transportation." Envision this. What would it take for the adults in your life, your parents and your uncles and aunts and your teachers, to choose to leave their cars at home and use public transportation for more of their trips, and to get around in your community by walking and bicycling rather than driving everywhere? That is the vision that we need in order to make your community a fair and efficient transportation system. Do you think we're doing that? Are we creating the kind of transportation system that somebody who owns a car will leave their car at home and use alternative modes of transportation for a lot of their trips? Are you doing it well in Dunedin? I don't think so. Now that's a negative statement. What's the positive statement we can make? There's tremendous opportunities to solve a lot of problems and to make your community a better place for everybody by improving the quality of walking, cycling, and public transportation. Okay, so let me point out some of the trends that are making this important. Now, I work in the realm of planning. My work and the work of the people of my colleagues is all about thinking about what we want our communities to look like a decade or two in the future. So we're always looking forward. We're asking, what are the trends, the demographic and economic trends that will affect the type of transportation system that people will want in the future? And we're at a very interesting time. The past is going to be different than the future. No, the future is going to be different than the past. The last century, the 20th century, was the period of automobile ascendancy. During that period, you went from almost nobody owning a car. In 1900, almost nobody owned a car. And by the year 2000, automobile transportation dominated most cities, most communities. So that was the period of growth in the number of automobiles and the amount of driving that people engaged in. An interesting thing happened about the year 2005. Vehicle ownership and use peaked in most developed countries. We've seen it in virtually all of the European countries. We've seen it in North America and Canada. And as this graph shows, we're seeing it in New Zealand. Automobile ownership and automobile travel has peaked. During the 20th century, it made sense to devote a lot of resources to building roads and parking facilities to accommodate the growth in automobile travel. That is not growing anymore. What should we do now? If in the past it made sense to devote a lot of resources to building roads and parking facilities to accommodate growing automobile travel, what should we do now that there's not going to be any more growth? And transportation planners and city officials and the people in charge of allocating funding for transportation need to think about this question. And I have an answer. I think we need to start thinking in terms of quality, not quantity. I believe that in order to respond to future travel demands, that is the type of transportation system that people will want in the future, we want not more, mobility. Not more travel, but better travel options. We need better walking, better cycling, better public transportation, and better information options so you, as a non-driver, will be able to get around your city more conveniently, more efficiently. And there's actually good economic research indicating that this is what we need to meet your future travel demands. You as a young person planning for your future will say, I want to live in a community where I can get around with where I can depend on walking and cycling and public transit for a significant portion of my trips because of the combination of things like aging population, rising fuel prices, increasing traffic and parking congestion, increasing costs of expanding roads, environmental concerns, and health concerns. Let me ask you this. Are there some times when you actually enjoy going out for a walk? Yes? What about a bike ride? Do you enjoy that? So could you say that part of achieving happiness in your community is about making sure that you're able to walk and bike when you feel like it? You betcha. That's the ultimate message of my presentation, is that increasingly people want to be able to rely more on walking, bicycling, and public transit. Now, this graph shows the amount of travel that people engage in. So per annual vehicle kilometers traveled. So the amount of travel average person travels for different age groups comparing 2001 with 2008. And you see those red circles? Those highlight what happened. The red circle on the left highlights the very significant reduction in average annual vehicle travel for 15 to 19-year-old, 20 to 24, 25 to 29-year-olds, and 30 to 34-year-olds between 2001 and 2008. What this shows, and what a lot of other research is showing, is that young people, that is you, the smart young people in this room, are a little bit less inclined to drive than people were a decade earlier at your same age. What do you think causes that? Yes?
I just suggested the GFC, making incomes lower, more expensive to drive.
Say that again? The
GFC, global financial crisis in 2008.
Oh, global financial crisis. Yeah, but this is actually, this change occurred before there was any global financial crisis. This change started when we were at the peak. You know what I think it is? Mobile telephones. When I was young men like me, we felt like we wanted a car for status. Now, a young person maintains their status by having this coolest new mobile phone. Or to put it differently, there are a lot of young people that are more willing to give up a car than they're willing to give up a mobile phone. If you were asked to choose between, would you like to have a really good phone and a really good computer with unlimited internet access, or have no phone and no internet access but have a nice car? Increasingly, young people choose the telecommunications devices. That is actually that actually gives you more services than simply owning a car. And that's part of what we see going on here. Or to put it differently, increasingly we find young people want a less automobile-dependent, more multimodal lifestyle. So we're seeing, for example, when people graduate from university, a lot of them want to live in an urban area. They want a loft apartment within walking distance of the kind of services. They want to be within walking distance of coffee shops and little stores and art galleries, rather than move out to the suburbs. Does that ring true for those of you in the studio? Does it feel like older people cared more about cars than younger people? Maybe a little bit? Okay, well, let's explore this a little bit more. The way economists talk about this is latent demand. Latent demand means people want to do something, they want to consume or they want to engage in something and they're unable to because we're not providing the right services. And there's a lot of evidence of latent demand for walking, bicycling, and public transit. And one of the examples is that the US federal government, it sponsored a non-motorized transportation pilot project where they improved walking and cycling conditions in about half a dozen cities. And they found, after they improved the sidewalks and the crosswalks and the bike paths, that walking and bicycling increased significantly, and the growth continued for years on end. So what that suggests, what the research is suggesting, is that there are a lot of people who want to rely more on walking and bicycling and public transit travel if we can provide the right services, if it's easy to get around by, let's say, bicycling. If your city has good bicycle facilities, there are some people who will leave their cars at home and use bicycling rather than being, if you're an adult, rather than driving, or if you're a young person, rather than being chauffeured by say, your parents. Most of the increases in walking and cycling that resulted from these pilot projects was in utilitarian travel. It wasn't just recreational trips that increased. It was people reducing their car travel. And that makes everybody better off. That's the point of my research. So let me tell you, I'll just talk about a few of some of the benefits that can result if we do a better job of accommodating that demand for walking, cycling, and public transit. Well, one of the things that we find, as indicated by this graph and a lot of other research I've been engaged in, is that if your community is very automobile dependent, there are a lot of traffic injuries and deaths, a lot of traffic casualties. When I grew up in a very automobile-dependent community. It was Los Angeles, California, in the 1960s. Virtually everybody I knew, virtually all of my peers, had a friend, at least one friend, who had died in a car crash. My children grew up in a very multimodal city, Victoria, British Columbia. None of their friends died in a car crash. Let me ask you this. How many of you in this room know somebody who's died in a car crash, one of your peers? Okay. I'll note, few of the young people here raise their hands. So it suggests that Dunedin is actually a relatively safe community, probably partly because you have somewhat less automobile travel. You're probably somewhat less automobile dependent than a lot of other communities. Now, I have no data, so I cannot really say that. But one of the good news messages that I think we need to emphasize is that the communities, the newer communities where people are less automobile dependent, are far, far safer. This graph shows that. Each of those dots represents a U.S. city. The blue are the cities that are considered very transit-oriented. There are cities like New York, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, where there are cities that are really well designed to get around without a car. And the vertical axis is traffic fatalities per capita. And what this graph is showing is that if you live in one of those transit-oriented communities, if you live in a community where people rely a lot on public transit, your chance of dying in a car crash is far lower. This graph shows essentially the same thing. This graph compares the traffic fatality rate, so the death rate, for 280 U.S. counties rated according to a sprawl index. So the cities that are whose traffic fatality rates or the counties with traffic fatality rates indicated in blue, those are the smart growth communities. Those are the communities where people can get around with walking, bicycling, and public transit well. The columns on the right are the 10 most sprawled U.S. counties, and it shows if you live in an automobile-dependent sprawled community in the U.S., your chance of dying in a car crash is about 4 times greater than if you live in a smart growth community. In other words, if your community, if Dunedin grows on smart growth principles, so you continue to create communities where people don't have to drive everywhere, where it's easy to get around with walking, bicycling, public transit, you are far safer. You have a quarter of the traffic fatality rate as if you move into an automobile-dependent, sprawled community. Now that is very good news. It means more people are going to live. It means that smart growth can provide some very significant benefits that people care about. And yet we've failed to communicate this. A lot of us promote smart growth, but usually the message is smart growth is good for the environment and it reduces infrastructure costs. It reduces costs to governments. We have failed to communicate the very large safety benefits that are associated with smart growth principles. In fact, a lot of people have it backward. They think that moving out to the automobile-dependent suburbs is safer because they're thinking there's something dangerous about cities. And they are absolutely wrong. The safest place to raise your children is in a walkable urban neighborhood. And there are a number of reasons for that. It isn't just traffic fatality rates. It's also physical activity. Turns out New Zealand is one of the places with very significant problems with obesity and sedentary living. Sedentary living means people aren't getting enough exercise. To be healthy, we recommend that people get at least 22 minutes a day of physical activity. And if we fail to, it shows up in a number of ways, including this very high obesity rate. And this is particularly concerning because the obesity rate has been growing among young people in New Zealand, and that's what this graph shows. So obesity rates are an indication that people aren't getting enough exercise and are eating too much. And there are many ways to exercise, but some of them are a recipe for failure. If we tell people that in order to exercise, you have to go to a gym to work out, and you have to do that at least 4 times a week, or at least an hour 4 times a week, and you have to do that for your whole life, how many people are going to do that? Well, the athletes, the people who have a motivation to work out, they'll exercise. But the people who are most at risk, people who are overweight, who are currently sedentary, people who are low income, people who have a very busy schedule, they're going to find excuses to not go to the gym. If we really want people to exercise, and we want the highest risk people, we're especially concerned about getting people who are overweight to exercise, how are we going to do that? On a community-wide basis. We're going to build walkable and bikeable communities. That's that, and we're going to encourage them to get a dog. Because it turns out if you have a dog in your household, you're more likely to get exercise than if you don't. And especially if you're overweight and sedentary. So, to me, that's very good news. Creating walkable and bikeable communities is really good for a lot of reasons. And one of the positive outcomes from that is that you get more physically active people. You get people to exercise more and be less be less sedentary. Okay, there's also some really good financial reasons for your household to choose to live in a walkable, bikeable community. If you live in an automobile-dependent community, every adult is expected to have a car. And that costs somewhere around $5,000 a year. That's $4,000 to $6,000 a year to own and operate a car. That's a big chunk of money. If you, for example, if your parents want to put aside enough money to finance your university education, or to be able to afford some really nice ski holidays, or if you have if there are other things you want to spend your money on, like good mobile phone service, it's really good if your family chooses to live in a community where you don't need to own a car for every adult, where you go from 2 cars to 1 car or 1 car to 0 cars. And let me tell you, from personal experience, our family has been car-free. Our demographically average family, 2 adults, 2 children, dog, cat. We got by without owning a car because we live in a walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented community. Is that a good thing? Sure. And yet, our transportation planning deprives a lot of households of this option. Okay, and there's also an equity imperative, a fairness imperative. In most communities, 20 to 40% of the population can't drive. If we create a transportation system that primarily serves motorists, it is not fair to people who are too young, too old, physically disabled, or low income that can't drive. Okay, so if you want to get technical about this, you can do a lot of analysis of the various categories of benefits associated with improving walking, cycling, and public transit. And I've done a lot of research on this, and you can categorize it in various ways. We're not going to spend time on all these categories. The point I want to make is usually people are only thinking about one or two of these categories. So you have the health professionals that are very concerned about reducing traffic accidents and improving physical fitness and reducing air pollution. And you've got your business people who are concerned about reducing parking problems and helping their customers save money. So you're spending less money on gasoline, so you have more money to spend on local restaurants and stores. And you've got traffic engineers who are concerned about traffic congestion reduction. And the point that I want to make is improving walking, bicycling, and public transit, creating a multimodal transportation system, it provides a whole host of benefits. You couldn't ask for a better product. If you were a marketing expert and your job was to sell this product, you couldn't ask for a better product, and yet the message has not gotten out there to a lot of decision makers. City councilors who are deciding how to spend local transportation dollars, and federal officials who manage the national transportation budget, and the traffic engineers, they're unaware of a lot of these categories of benefits. So, what should young people do in order to help create the type of transportation system that serves our needs, the needs of young people, and the needs of seniors, and the needs of people with disabilities, and the needs of low-income people, and the needs of people who enjoy walking and bicycling for fun, and their pets? What should we do? Your job, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to educate the decision makers about the full benefits of creating a multimodal transportation system. And part of that, one step in doing that, is what we call the multimodal transportation hierarchy, which says that when there's limited resources, when there's limited money or limited road space or limited limited land available for parking, that we make sure that we give priority to walking, bicycling, and public transit before we accommodate private automobile travel. That's not to say we're going to take away people's cars, but let me give you an example. Right near the university is a very busy road. Tragically, on that road, recently, a professor was killed when he was bicycling. Now, you can look at that site and you say, well, that accident resulted because the bike lane is so narrow that he was forced to ride right next to the parked cars, and a motorist opened up a car door. He was doored, is the way we describe it. And so the smart solution, if we really care about about creating a bikeable community, your city would take away the parking lane and convert it to a bike lane. Very simple. Keep in mind, that parking lane, it's just for storage of cars. It's not even for people traveling. It's just a parking space. And there's actually plenty of parking nearby. So yes, that's a particularly convenient parking space. You're driving along and you see an empty space and you pull into it. If you don't have that parking space, you would have to pull off the arterial and find a parking lot somewhere else. So it's a little inconvenience for motorists, but nobody's going to die if they have to search for a parking space. And in fact, we have some great new technologies that can help you identify exactly where a parking space is available. So there's actually no problem taking off those. There's really no overall problem removing those on-street parking spaces. But what's the barrier? automobile dependency. The thinking by public officials is that cars come first. And a bike lane is a luxury to be added if there's extra space, not an imperative that should always be there. And the parking is considered a luxury. So that is the paradigm shift, the change in the way we think about the problem and evaluate solution that is going to be needed. So if you think in most developed countries, walking and bicycling represents about 12 to 20% of all trips are made by walking and cycling, probably more in Dunedin right here, right in this area. And yet you ask what portion of transportation dollars of the city's transportation budget and the national transportation budget is devoted to walking and bicycling facilities, and it's about 2%. There's about 5 times as much walking and bicycling going on as the share of funding devoted to those modes. Is there any reason that we should favor, that we should spend more to allow a mom to drive a child to school than we would spend allowing that child to get to school by walking and bicycling? Is there any logical reason that we should favor driving over walking, bicycling, and public transit? I don't think so. I think if anything is the reverse. And yet the way we think about it, it favors walking and bicycling. So, I mean, it favors automobile over walking and bicycling. Okay, so let me tell you how transportation engineers think about this. The concept, the new concept, is what we call complete streets, which means that we guarantee that whenever we design a street, we make sure that it serves all users. It serves pedestrians and cyclists and public transit users and motorists and people who are sitting at a sidewalk cafe next to that street. And we're taking into account all those needs. Now, that's a beautiful idea. I think that that is really the crux of what we're talking about, and yet it's considered a radical new idea, and currently, in your community, it's a struggle. From what I understand, Dunedin hasn't fully embraced complete streets concepts, which sounds really negative, so let me turn that into a positive statement. Your community has a tremendous opportunity to make sure that it serves everybody's needs, not just the needs of motorists, by implementing complete streets policies, and this is true virtually everywhere. Okay, so there's a bunch of technical details, and I get involved in them. I'm not expecting all of you to get involved in them, but I'm going to give you a very quick overview. What we need is comprehensive multimodal planning. The traditional way to evaluate transportation system performance, to think about, to measure how good your city is doing, was to measure roadway level of service. So we would say, we would measure the roads in terms of the ease of driving. So level of service is an indicator of how easy it is to drive. And we would produce maps like this that show where the system is failing for motorists. And one of the great breakthroughs is to have multimodal level of service performance indicators. So now the new design manuals that transportation engineers use, the one that, in fact, the highway capacity manual that came out in the US in 2010, so 3 years ago, now has level of service indicators for walking and bicycling and public transit in addition to driving. So we can produce maps like this that show where the system is failing for pedestrians and bicyclists, not just motorists. How do you think Dunedin would rate? Or what would happen if you had a map that showed all the places where it's difficult to walk and bike? And you put that up in front of City Council, and you said, before we spend any more money on roads and parking facilities, let's make sure we bring these streets that are failing in terms of walking and bicycling up to standard. You would get some bike lanes on those busy roads. You would get nicer crosswalks and sidewalks, and you would get bicycle parking facilities, and you'd get bus lanes, so it's easier to get around your city by bus than by driving. So let me give you a very quick view of what this looks like, just as an example. I'm going to show you a complete streets design. This is a typical ugly automobile-dependent streetscape. You got a road, and you got driveways that go into parking lots. What happens if the city spends a couple $1 million to put in nice sidewalks and crosswalks and what we call a refuge island, so you only have to cross half the street at a time, makes it much easier to cross the street, a bus stop. If you put this infrastructure into place, if there's demand for people who want to live and work in walkable communities, the developers will come and they'll put in the buildings that are pedestrian and bicycle and transit oriented. So suddenly, now, right there, or let's go back. If you didn't own a car, if you're a walker, bicyclist, transit person, you can't get around. This landscape assumes that everybody has a car and is going to use a car to get everywhere. This landscape assumes that some people are going to get around by walking and bicycling. And let's say you want to live without a car. You would choose to live in one of those apartments over those shops. That's a perfect place for somebody that doesn't want to have to own a car to get to locate. And then it matures and becomes this really nice urban village. So one of the questions that we have to ask is, how well does our community do creating urban villages? So there's a whole bunch of specific ways to do this. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into detail, so I'm just going to give a quick run through. But there's investments in sidewalks, crosswalks, paths, improved roadway shoulders for cyclists, reducing traffic speed, bicycle parking and changing facilities. There's a lot that we could do to make riding public transit, waiting for the bus and getting on the bus and traveling around by bus much nicer. That even affluent people would leave their cars at home and use public transportation whenever they could because it's a better experience. We can do a lot what we call smart growth, creating these urban villages. Now the exciting thing is the professionals that I work with, the transportation planners and engineers and urban planners, they love this stuff. In fact, if you, as a young person, want to help create paradise on earth, you want to make really nice communities, there's nothing better that you could do than to go into the fields of planning or transportation engineering or become a local elected official and work on implementing these wonderful new ideas and overcoming the barriers that we face in creating walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented communities. Now, an important point I want to emphasize is that this is not anti-car. If you think back to those pictures that I showed you of the walkable urban villages, there's still plenty of cars there. They're not going to drive very fast. They're going to be driving at 20 or 30 kilometers an hour, not 50 to 60 in an urban area. And some of the time, the motorists are going to have to pay for parking, but this is not anti-car. Motorists have every reason to support improving walking, cycling, and public transit because it reduces their traffic and parking congestion, improves their safety, it improves their travel options when they do want to use alternatives, it reduces their chauffeuring burdens, and it's more cost-effective overall. So, you think that all you have to do is sit around, but nope, I'm going to put you to work. This afternoon, we're going to go on a field trip. And we're going to look around your city streets and we're going to do an evaluation. You are going to take the first step in becoming an urban transportation professional. You're going to rate the level of service for walking and cycling. So we're going to look at things. We're going to have this sheet. You're going to have this sheet that has this information. And we're going to look at the performance factors. What are the walking conditions? What are the cycling conditions? What are the public transit? What are the safety and security? What is the degree of universal design, which means we're accommodating people in wheelchairs or with luggage? What's the ease of finding out information? And what's the social status of getting around with walking, bicycling, and public transit? And we are going to think about this and think about the barriers to multimodalism and think about the opportunities to make your community a more multimodal area. So, very quickly, here are key conclusions. There are many benefits to multimodalism. It's particularly important to young people, seniors, people with disabilities, low-income households and visitors. Current demographic and economic trends are increasing the benefits of multimodalism, Policy and planning decisions affect the quality of travel options available in a community, so cities with supportive programs have far more walking, cycling, and public transit going on. Conventional transportation planning tends to undervalue many of these benefits, and so it's underinvesting in walking, cycling, and public transit. And very important to the people in this audience, my final conclusion, young people can help make their communities fairer and more efficient by working with other groups. You can form a coalition with seniors and with people with disabilities and environmentalists and public health professionals and business groups to support walking, cycling, and public transit. So you are now responsible for creating the community that you're going to want to live in as you grow older. So, if anybody wants more information on the data that I presented, on the research and the planning concepts that I presented, you can visit our website, the Victoria Transport Policy Institute website, and look at some of the documents that are related to what I was just presenting. So thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to share information.
I think we have time for maybe one or two questions,
Sure,
perhaps. Thank you very much, Todd. Are there any questions for Mr. Litman?
I just wondered about that idea of cyclists being doored on the roads. That picture that you showed us of the complete street, how does that reduce the likelihood of that occurring?
That's right. Well, the first thing you'll notice is that the cars are set back. But the devil is in the details. So the question is, how far is the parked car set back? So what we're looking at is, well, I have no pointer. Maybe I think I've actually got it here. Okay, so it's this. Notice that there is a bike lane here, but you're absolutely right. The question is this bike lane wide enough? The traffic fatality that occurred here was on a narrow bike lane. It was a bike lane that we would say is too narrow, and the parking was not set back. It didn't have as much setback. But I would agree entirely. It's even better to have no car parking at all. The best bike lanes are where there's zero chance of getting doored, because there is no parallel parking, that all of the parking is somewhere else. Every street, every road or every street is unique. So I can't tell you that there's a design that works everywhere. That's why that's why you need professional planners. You need specialists that can look at a street and say, this is the best, and what you would call it is a cross-section or a profile. This is the best design for this street, taking into account all these factors. The key point that I make is, right now, we virtually always say motor vehicle travel and motor vehicle parking comes first. We're going to design this road to accommodate car travel and car access, and then if there's extra space, we'll put in a bike lane. And that's where I think the fundamental starting point is, to give the designers, the engineers, a mandate that says walking and bicycling come first. Guarantee that it's safe, and then if there's space, we'll put in some automobile parking. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Anything else?
One more question from Anne-Marie, I believe, and that'll be it probably.
I was just wondering, are the multi-modal systems quite expensive to develop? Because perhaps there's a reason why planners would prefer not to develop them, whereas if they favour an automobile-dependent system, then people are going to buy cars and they're going to buy petrol, and that's good for those companies.
Well, you bring up two issues. It's actually far cheaper to accommodate walking and bicycling and on busy corridors public transportation than it is to accommodate those same trips by car, if you take into account the cost of the roads, the cost of the parking at destinations, and the cost to the household of owning that car. So let's think of this. If your community allows 90% of, let's say, if you're in an automobile-dependent community, 80% of all young people get to school by being driven. So you need extra wide roads. The school needs a big parking lot. And every household, let's say the typical household has to own 2 cars. If your community is designed around walking, bicycling, and public transit, maybe only 20% of children get to school by car. And so you can get by with narrow roads. The school doesn't need all that parking. And a lot of households can go from 2 cars to 1 car. Huge savings, I can assure you. I've done the analysis. These are very significant savings. But the problem that we have is that the money for roads and the money for parking facilities is essentially pre-programmed. It's already in an account that's designated for those uses. If we say, let's build more walking and bicycling facilities, we're asking for a new budget. And so it seems expensive because we're asking for something new. If we took the money that we spend on parking facilities and we said, we're not going to build as many parking lots, but we are going to use the savings for roads and for bicycle and pedestrian facilities, it would be cheaper overall. But we don't usually allow that to occur. Now, the second issue that you bring up is this perception that it's good for the economy for people to drive, to own cars and drive. And that's actually not true at all. It turns out that New Zealand does not produce much petroleum, and it produces I don't think any vehicles. Did you have? Okay, so every time somebody buys a car, they're sending money to Japan. And every time somebody buys a liter of petroleum, they're sending money to Thailand or Saudi Arabia or Nigeria. So your economy is actually much better off if the average household only owns 1 car and only drives it, let's say, 15,000 kilometers a year, than if the average household owns 2 cars and drives those 2 cars 40,000 kilometers a year, because they're spending more money on their cars and they have less money to spend at local restaurants, on clothing, on house improvements, on education. So if you do the analysis, and there's a particular technique that economists use, it's called an input-output or regional economic impact table. And if you do that analysis, it turns out what we're talking about here, creating communities where households don't have to own as many cars and people aren't driving as much, is actually very good for your local economy. There are no oil wells here in Dunedin, but there are plenty of bike shops, and there are plenty of restaurants that will be glad. If you walk and bicycle all the time, walking and bicycling is just an excuse to go out and eat. And so if you walk and bicycle, you're spending more money at local restaurants. And on a per dollar spent, that creates more jobs and more local business activity than the same money spent on filling up the tank of your car with gas. Okay, I think that's all, right? We're at time.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.